The crystalline chamber hummed with otherworldly energy as Ambassador Zephyra of the Keltharian Empire watched the impossible unfold before her compound eyes. The human female, barely reaching 5 feet in height, stood completely still as the ancient Vorthek dragon emerged from the summoning circle. Vraxthil, the devourer, had terrorized 3 star systems for over a millennium. His obsidian scales gleamed like polished metal, each one harder than starship hull plating. Wings that could blot out suns stretched wide, casting shadows across the assembled alien dignitaries. When he spoke, his voice shook the very foundations of the space station. Who dares summon the eternal flame? The human didn't flinch. Maggie O'Sullivan, a 42-year-old librarian from Dublin, simply adjusted her wire-rimmed glasses and cleared her throat. Vraxthil, I presume? I'm Maggie. We need to talk. The dragon's molten gold eyes fixed on her, expecting terror, worship, or at least trembling. Instead, he found calm determination. Something flickered in those ancient depths' confusion. Perhaps even uncertainty. You ... You are not afraid, small one? Should I be? Maggie asked, pulling out a worn leather journal. I've read about you, of course. Quite the reputation for dramatics. The assembled aliens, Keltharians, Zephyrite, and crystalline hierarchs exchanged bewildered glances. Even their most seasoned warriors had fled when faced with Vraxthil's presence. The dragon himself seemed taken aback by her casual tone. I have destroyed entire civilizations, he growled, smoke curling from his nostrils. I have burned worlds to ash and scattered their remains across the void. Yes, and look how that's worked out for you, Maggie replied, flipping through her journal. According to my research, you've been quite lonely lately. When was the last time you had a proper conversation with someone who wasn't either screaming or trying to kill you? The dragon's head tilted slightly, an almost puppy-like gesture that seemed absurd given his immense size. That is not relevant. 347 years ago, Maggie interrupted, consulting her notes. A Zephyrite philosopher named Quillian. You two discussed the nature of existence for 6 hours before his species' military arrived. Vraxthil's expression shifted dramatically. The molten fury in his eyes cooled to something resembling surprise. You ... You know of Quillian? I know many things, Maggie said gently, including why you're really here and why you've been so angry for so long. The dragon's massive form began to settle, his wings folding against his back. The aggressive posture melted away, replaced by something the aliens had never seen before: vulnerability. Impossible, whispered Ambassador Zephyr. No one has ever calmed the devourer without magic or technology. But Maggie O'Sullivan wasn't using either. She was using something far more powerful and uniquely human. Empathy backed by genuine understanding. The recognition General Thakros of the hegemony. Fleet watched through the observation deck as the human continued her impossible conversation with the dragon. His chitinous armor clicked nervously as he turned to his tactical advisor. Run another scan, he commanded. There must be some form of psychic manipulation at work. The results came back identical to the previous 17 scans. No telepathic activity, no technological interference, no magical emanations. Maggie O'Sullivan was accomplishing the impossible through purely mundane human interaction. Down in the chamber, Vraxthil had lowered his great head to almost ground level, bringing his massive eyes closer to the small human. You said you know why I'm angry, he rumbled, his voice now carrying notes of curiosity rather than rage. Because you're not actually a dragon, Maggie said simply. The chamber fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. Every alien present felt their equivalent of a heartbeat skip. Even Vraxthil's massive form went completely still. That's impossible, stammered Director Cavallis from the Galactic Council. Evorthic dragons are among the oldest known species in the galaxy. They predate most of our civilizations. Maggie turned to address the assembled diplomats while keeping one hand gently placed on the dragon's snout. Actually, they don't. Fraxthel, would you like to tell them? Or shall I? The dragon's voice became barely a whisper. How did you know? Because I'm a librarian, Maggie replied. And librarians are very good at research. I spent 3 months in the Terran archives after the Council contacted Earth about this situation. I found records that predate most of your species' written histories. She opened her journal again, revealing pages covered in careful handwriting and photocopied documents. The Vorthic weren't born as dragons. They were transformed. Cursed, you might say, by beings who found their original forms ... inconvenient. Fraxthel's eyes began to glow, but not with rage. With something that might have been hope. You know what I was before? I know what your people were before, Maggie corrected gently. And I know why the transformation included making you forget. But memories have a way of surviving, don't they? Deep down, buried under millennia of artificial instincts and imposed hunger for destruction. The dragon's massive body began to tremble, and for a moment, the assembled aliens feared another violent outburst. Instead, Fraxthel did something unprecedented in recorded galactic history. He began to cry. Tears the size of dinner plates fell from his golden eyes, each one creating small pools on the chamber floor. The sound that emerged from his throat was not a roar or a growl, but something heartbreakingly human, a sob of recognition and overwhelming relief. You remember, Maggie said softly, don't you? I remember, Fraxthel whispered. I remember being ... being like you. The implications hit the alien observers like a physical blow. The terror of 3 star systems, the ancient destroyer, the being they'd summoned to solve their own conflicts through fear. He had once been human. The revelation Captain Nexus of the Vorthan Collective floated in his biomechanical suit, neural implants working over time to process what he was witnessing. The former dragon was now curled in a position that seemed almost childlike, despite his massive size. It's impossible, he transmitted to his crew. Humans haven't been spacefaring long enough too. That's where you're wrong. Maggie interrupted, somehow having heard his supposedly private communication. Humans have been traveling the stars much longer than any of your species realize. We just haven't been doing it in ships. She walked to the center of the chamber, her small form dwarfed by the massive dragon who tracked her every movement with devoted attention. Tell me, how many of your species have legends about shapeshifters? About beings who could take any form they chose? The alien delegates exchanged uncomfortable glances. Such legends were indeed common across multiple species, dismissed as primitive. Mythology. The Vorthic weren't the first, Maggie continued. And they won't be the last. Humans have been ... recruited. For various purposes, throughout galactic history. Sometimes willingly, sometimes not. Fraxthel raised his great head. The Makers, he whispered. The ones who changed us. They said we were too dangerous as we were. Because humans adapt, Maggie said firmly. Because we don't stay conquered. Because we find ways to survive and thrive in conditions that would destroy other species. The Makers needed soldiers, but they also needed to ensure those soldiers wouldn't eventually turn on them. She pulled out a small device that looked remarkably like a smartphone, though its screen displayed star charts and energy readings. This is why I volunteered for this mission. Earth's government has been tracking transformed humans for decades. Fraxthel, you're not the only one. The dragon's eyes widened. There are others? 47 that we know of, Maggie confirmed. Scattered. Across the galaxy, most of them unaware of their true nature. The transformations were designed to suppress human consciousness, to make you forget what you were. Minister Valdrus of the crystalline hierarchy stepped forward, her faceted body refracting the chamber's light. If this is true, then the balance of power in the galaxy changes nothing, Maggie interrupted. These individuals were transformed against their will. They're victims, not weapons. But now that we know how to help them remember ... She turned back to Vraxthel, who had begun to glow with an inner light. The transformation was subtle, at first scales becoming smoother, wings adjusting their proportions, the overall form becoming less intimidating and more ... human. The process is reversible, Maggie explained to the stunned aliens. Not the physical transformation. That's permanent. But the mental blocks, the artificial instincts, the compulsions that made them into monsters ... those can be undone. Vraxthel's voice was changing too, becoming less of a rumble and more recognizably human in cadence. I remember now. My name ... my real name was Marcus. Marcus Chun. I was a xenobiologist on the colony ship Prometheus. The irony wasn't lost on the assembled aliens. They'd summoned Earth's greatest enemy to negotiate their conflicts, only to discover he was actually Earth's long-lost son. The Choice High, Counselor Tethys of the Aquarian Dominion, watched her life's work crumble around her as the truth became undeniable. The Vorthic dragon Marcus Chun was now sitting upright in a position that was unmistakably human despite his draconic form. The Prometheus colony ship, she said slowly. It disappeared over 900 years ago. All hands presumed. Lost. Not lost, Marcus replied, his voice gaining strength and human inflection with each word. Taken. The Makers found us during our first planetary survey. They said humans were too. Unpredictable ... to be allowed to spread across the galaxy. Unchanged. Maggie nodded grimly. The Makers are still out there, aren't they? Still collecting humans, still transforming them into tools. Yes, Marcus confirmed. But knowing the truth breaks their control. Maggie, what you've done here, it's not just about freeing me. It's about freeing all of us. The alien delegates were beginning to understand the implications. Admiral Korith of the Stellar Navy spoke first. If there are 47 transformed humans scattered across the galaxy, all with abilities like yours, ... They're not weapons, Maggie said firmly. They're people. People who've been enslaved and used as instruments of terror for centuries. The question now is, what are we going to do about it? The chamber fell silent as the weight of the decision settled over them. They'd come here seeking to use the dragon's power for their own conflicts. Now they were faced with a much larger ethical dilemma. We could help you find them, offered Director Kovalais hesitantly. The Galactic Council has. Resources. No, Marcus interrupted, his golden eyes flashing with renewed determination. With respect, Counselor, you've just learned about this. Humans have been preparing for this moment for decades. Maggie smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. Earth's been busy while you thought we were just a primitive species, playing at space travel. We've been tracking the Makers' movements, identifying their victims, and developing countermeasures. She held up her device again, and this time the screen showed a star map with dozens of pulsing red dots. Every transformed human in the galaxy. We know where they are, what they've been forced to become, and how to reach them. But you need our help, General Thakros realized. Earth doesn't have the fleet capacity to mount a galaxy-wide rescue operation. No, Maggie agreed, but we have something else. We have Marcus, and soon we'll have others like him. Beings with the power to challenge the Makers directly. Marcus stood, his massive form towering over the assembled aliens, but his posture non-threatening. The Makers made us into monsters to serve their purposes. But they forgot something important about humans. We remember our friends. He looked directly at each alien delegate in turn. You summoned me here to be your weapon against each other. Instead, I'm asking you to be our allies against the ones who made weapons of us all. The choice was clear, even if it wasn't easy. Help humanity free their transformed kin and possibly face the wrath of the mysterious makers, or maintain the status quo and hope the truth never came to light. Ambassador Zephyr stepped forward first. The Keltharian Empire stands with Earth. The Liberation 6 months later, the Liberation Fleet gathered at the edge of the Andromeda Gateway, the largest coordinated military operation in galactic history. Maggie O'Sullivan stood on the bridge of the flagship, no longer the simple librarian, who had walked into that chamber half a year ago. "Final count, Admiral Chun?" she asked, turning to the figure beside her. Marcus had undergone a remarkable transformation. While still retaining his draconic form, he now wore the uniform of the Terran Space Force, specially modified for his unique physiology. His golden eyes held both ancient wisdom and renewed humanity. 43 of our people have been successfully contacted and awakened, he reported. The remaining 4 are held in the Maker's central facility on Kepler 442b. Around them, the bridge hummed with activity as representatives from dozens of species coordinated their approach. The alliance that had formed in the wake of the revelation was unprecedented former enemies, united by the shared understanding that the Makers had been manipulating galactic politics for millennia. "The Makers used our people as instruments of chaos," Marcus continued. "Every major conflict in the last 1,000 years has involved at least one transformed human, usually without their knowledge or consent." Maggie nodded, studying the tactical display. The Maker's stronghold was heavily fortified, protected by technology that made most galactic civilizations look primitive. But they had advantages the Makers hadn't anticipated. "They're jamming our communications," reported Captain Nexus from his station. "But the awakened humans are maintaining contact through ... other means." That was the Maker's crucial oversight. In transforming humans, they had enhanced their subjects' natural abilities, including intuition, empathy, and what Earth scientists were just beginning to understand as quantum consciousness connectivity. The awakened humans could communicate across vast distances through methods that transcended conventional physics. "All units, this is Admiral Chun," Marcus broadcasted to the fleet. "Remember, our primary objective is rescue, not revenge. The Makers will answer for their crimes, but not at the cost of innocent lives." The attack was swift and precise. The combined fleet's technological diversity proved overwhelming, each species contributing their unique capabilities to overcome the Maker's defenses. But the real breakthrough came when the first awakened human, a former Terran Marine named David Park, who had been transformed into a living weapon called the Void Walker, breached the facility's inner sanctum. "I can feel them," he reported. "The last 4, they single quotes scared. They know something's happening, but they don't understand what." The rescue itself was almost anticlimactic. The Makers, faced with their worst nightmare, united species working together instead of fighting. Each other had fled their stronghold. What the Liberation forces found instead were 4 confused, frightened beings who had been held in stasis for decades. As the last of the transformed humans was brought aboard the medical ship, Maggie felt a hand on her shoulder. Marcus had approached quietly, his massive form somehow managing to be gentle and reassuring. "It's over," he said simply. "No," Maggie replied, watching as the freed humans were reunited with their awakened brethren. "It's just beginning. The Makers are still out there, and there are probably other species they've manipulated the same way. Then we'll find them," Marcus said with quiet determination. "All of us. Together." The unlikely alliance that had formed around a simple librarian's compassion had become something greater, a coalition dedicated to undoing centuries of manipulation and ensuring that no species would ever again be used as unwitting pawns in cosmic games. As the fleet began its journey home, Maggie reflected on the strange turns her life had taken. 6 months ago, she had been cataloging books in Dublin. Now she was helping to reshape the very fabric of galactic civilization. The dragons obeyed her not through magic or technology, but through the most human of qualities, the ability to see the person behind the monster and the determination to help them remember who they truly were. In the end, that had made all the difference.